Jay Gabler, Duluth News Tribune arts and entertainment reporter, back with another special episode of the DNT Minute featuring my column, Front Row Seat. This week I look into a controversial question. Is Duluth on the North Shore? When I shared the news last year that I was relocating from Minneapolis to Duluth, many of my Twin Cities friends expressed jealousy. I was moving to the North Shore. At least, that was how they saw it. Once I actually became a Duluthian, I realized the North Shore started to seem farther away. People living in Duluth, I noticed, referred to the North Shore as somewhere you'd have to leave the city to visit. The News Tribune, for example, has a tag for North Shore news that's not typically applied to stories about anything inside city limits. To Duluth readers, that makes perfect sense. If you're on the North Shore, you're not in Duluth. On the other hand, if I stand on the lake walk and look south, I see the South Shore. So where am I then, if not on the North Shore? To figure it out, I consulted with an ecologist and also with a historian. Chell Anderson is co-author of the 2015 coffee table tome North Shore, A Natural History of Minnesota's Superior Coast. She pointed out that the question of what constitutes the North Shore all depends on your point of view. She said, if you're in Thunder Bay, people there don't think of Minnesota's shore as the North Shore. If you're going to think about this globally or continentally, True North is in Canada. It's not here. Thunder Bay even complicates Duluthians' assumption that we live at the head of the lakes, explained Anderson. People talk about Lakehead as the place at the farthest distance from where water flows out of the lake, she said. In the U.S., continued Anderson, Duluth is the Lakehead. That's the farthest distance from St. Mary's River and the Soo Locks. But if you're in Canada, then Thunder Bay is your lakehead. Both places have major rivers that come down into the lake and are the farthest distance from where the water moves out of the lake into the lower Great Lakes. No need to rename all those tournaments, festivals, and organizations. Duluth can still claim greater distance from Lake Superior's outflow point, both by water and as the crow flies. The point stands, though, that political boundaries inflect our perspective on features of the natural world. Duluth historian Tony Durkins asked, looking at a map, where does the North Shore start? Right at the foot of Minnesota Point, because Minnesota Point would be the western shore. Durkins pegs 3rd Avenue East in Duluth as the dividing line. By that estimation, Duluth is half on, half off of the North Shore. Or should that be North Shore without capital letters? Durkins continued, if I'm talking about the North Shore with capital letters and tourism and all the wonderful things there are to do on the North Shore, I'm imagining somewhere east of Kitchigami Park. Durkins pointed out that the question of whether Duluth is on the North Shore has become more complicated over the decades as the city boundaries have expanded along the lake. Places like Portland Square Park and the Portland Malt Shop echo the name of the Portland town site, which was annexed into Duluth in 1868. Durkins said, 3rd Avenue East, roughly, was where the border was. That's where the railroad came to an end and everything. The North Shore, back then, was considered anything on the shore. Before Lakeside and Lester Park were developed, there were 1 or 2 houses out there, and it was considered the wilderness. Every time Duluth expanded, it effectively pushed back the limits of what locals consider the North Shore. Durkins said, if you grew up here, the North Shore was somewhere else but Duluth. But if you're from other places, it's just all along the North Shore of Lake Superior. To further boggle the mind, consider the fact that not everyone agrees on the existence of such a thing as a west shore of Lake Superior. If you regard the lake as coming to a point, then there's only a North Shore and a South Shore. That's why University of Minnesota researchers studying currents describe Duluth's Park Point Beach as being located on Lake Superior's South Shore. From that perspective, Canal Park itself could be considered to be on the South Shore. If you want to go full galaxy brain on the North Shore question, you can turn the clock back hundreds of millions of years to the origins of what we now know as Lake Superior. The continent of North America didn't even exist yet, at least not in its current form. Volcanic activity on a supercontinent called Rodinia created heavy lava flows leading to a bedrock collapse that formed the Lake Superior Basin. More recently, like just a couple million years ago, a series of glaciations shoved sediment into our region from as far away as northern Canada. The Highland Moraine, a massive glacial till running parallel to the lakeshore, is the basis for much of the topographic diversity that's so striking to visitors from flatter parts of the state. As you travel from Duluth out along the shore, craggy bedrock formations give way to the moraine-dominated hills of Lake County. That transition helps create a visual differentiation that makes the North Shore, as Duluthians know it, feel different than the city. Farther north into the Sawtooth Mountains, bedrock again begins to dominate. Geologically and ecologically, explained Anderson, there's no hard and fast line dividing Duluth from the North Shore. She said, Duluth is really an amazing blend of many things coming together, particularly with the St. Louis River and its estuary. It's really an amazing variety of landforms and ecological systems. So what's the bottom line? It's complicated. On the one hand, it seems my Twin Cities friends were indeed oversimplifying in assuming that anyone moving to Duluth would be living on the North Shore. On the other hand, as an East Hillside resident, I'm certainly not living on any other shore, and in fact, a Duluthian of the Civil War era would absolutely consider my current neighborhood to be on the North Shore. That said, if you want to sound like a local, don't go to Sir Ben's and gush about the North Shore scenery you're currently enjoying. Hold that thought, at least until you pass Brighton Beach. Then, if you make it past Grand Portage, don't tell the Canadians you've been to the North Shore already. Maybe play it safe and just say, what a great lake. That's this week's column. Next week, I'll be back with a column about the memorial service for great Duluth musician, activist, social worker, Deanna Johnson. Until then, I'm Jay Gabler, Duluth News Tribune.